Victor Perton here. Today we're joined by Ashley Birkett. Dr. Ashley Birkett is the Program Leader for the Malaria Vaccine Initiative and Leader for the Malaria Disease Area at the Path Centre for Vaccine Innovation and Access. Victor Perton here, and this morning we are greatly honoured to have Ashley Birkett join us to talk about his malaria optimism and what he is seeing in the progress towards the elimination of malaria. Welcome, Ashley, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
Tell us, why are you optimistic that we can eradicate malaria?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is the realization that it's not acceptable in today's day and age for children to be dying of malaria wherever in the world they happen to be born. And I think it starts with that. And I think we have an alignment and a realization about that. We've made a huge amount of progress over the last 2 decades as we've scaled up the use of existing tools. But we can't afford to be complacent. We're starting to see some stalling of progress against malaria, and that we need to rethink how we approach this. We can't just assume that we're going to win the battle with the tools we have today. So I'm enthused by some new approaches, particularly the 10+1 initiative, which I'm hearing about from WHO, which is really going to go after some of the most challenging areas which have been hardest hit by malaria, where we're really not making the progress we want to see. And then finally, I would say that the realization that we don't have the tools that we need, and we need to continue to invest in new tools to really enable us to accelerate that progress towards elimination and eventual eradication. And so those are the reasons why I'm optimistic that we can eliminate and eventually eradicate malaria.
And what are you seeing in your research and what's around you as the most exciting developments towards the elimination and eradication of malaria?
So I've spent my career working on vaccines, and for the last 10 years or so, focused primarily on malaria vaccines. And this is a very difficult target, a parasite. We don't have human vaccines in use against human parasites, but we are on the verge of implementing the world's first malaria vaccine later this year. This is a program that we've been very actively involved with at PATH over almost 2 decades. And we're confident this vaccine can have a significant impact in terms of preventing disease and death in those who are most vulnerable, young African children. So I'm extremely optimistic about the role a vaccine can play, particularly as we're starting to see stalling of progress over the last few years. And this is really where a vaccine can step in and start to make a major contribution. I would also say, in addition to vaccines, seasonal malaria chemoprevention. I learned a lot more about this over the last year or so, particularly at a recent conference in Dakar in Senegal, and just remarkably impressed by how application of this tool can have a significant impact in areas of high malaria incidence during the rainy seasons. So I would say in the future, vaccine, but here and now, seasonal malaria chemoprevention clearly having a huge impact.
And who are the people that you most admire in terms of their work towards the elimination and eradication of malaria?
So I think there's several. There's a lot of people we can mention here, but I would say from a financial perspective, I mean, you really can't start without recognizing the contribution of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, particularly in the work that we are doing on accelerating malaria vaccine development. I would also highlight the Wellcome Trust in the UK as well. I think from a country perspective, and particularly in today's environment, the countries that have shown leadership and continue to stick with us in the fight against malaria, I think particularly of the UK, the US, Germany, Australia, and many others. I think the commitment of leaders in those countries to continue to advocate for the victims of malaria, or those at most risk from malaria, is commendable. And then I think some of the leading researchers who have had a huge contribution in this field, think like people like Sir Brian Greenwood, who's had contributions across multiple decades on bed nets, drugs, vaccines, huge impact in understanding how to best use the tools we have in the context of fighting the battle against malaria. So those are a few of my thoughts.
Tell us about the work you do, day to day, what does it take to create these new treatments and practices in relation to malaria?
So first and foremost, for me, it's really about partnership. It's really driving partnership with the organizations that provide the critical financial resources that we need to do our work, but then also the partners that have the outstanding new ideas in terms of innovation and new technologies that we want to bring to bear. The partners that are responsible for manufacturing and testing these products, particularly our partners in sub-Saharan Africa. So it's really a very complex network that's really built around partnership. And I really see us at the center of that wheel in terms of creating and maintaining the partnerships that are necessary for us to maximize the impact of the limited tools that we have to try and have the greatest impact ultimately in the fight against malaria.
Ashley, as we were talking before the interview, you told me that optimism is a choice, and it's a choice you've made in your life. So tell me, why are you optimistic, and what's your case for optimism?
Yeah, so absolutely. I do see optimism as a choice in life. And I find that as I approach my work and dealing with some of the most challenging, biological problems we have to deal with, like, protecting people against parasitic infections, I think optimism is critical if we're going to be successful. And it's not about being naive to the challenges. We have to face the challenges head on. But I think the choice of being optimistic about the future really helps to drive me in terms of my day-to-day work, make the right decisions, and hopefully leave the world in a better place than I found it when I was born several decades ago.
Ashley, thank you so much for joining us. Your work is brilliant, and I know that everyone who watches this will be excited. And we wish you all the best for your fantastic work in fighting and working hard for the elimination and eradication of malaria.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time and for your kind words.